We've got Hansi Mehrotra. Many of you may know her. She is a veteran charter holder volunteer for CFA Society India. Hansi does many things. She is the founder for Money Manage. She is the founder for. She is the founder for Money Management India. She is it's an investment research-based research-based industry portal for the Indian financial services industry. She also runs a financial literacy and investor education blog called the Money Huns. I was totally impressed when I saw pictures of Hansi doing teaching folks who have no access to financial service, lots of ladies, and she is very passionate about the financial literacy work. Importantly, before her current role, Hansi used to head the Asia Pacific operations for. She set up the Asia Pacific operations for wealth management for Mercer Investment Consulting. Her bio is quite long. I think in the brochure you'll have her entire bio. So welcome, Hansi.
Okay, so we haven't gone so there, but I would like to thank you, Srinivas, for the intro, and I'd like to introduce you to Sunil. Can you hear me now? Okay, so Sunil, I want to say I met him 15 years ago, which is I think the first CFA Society meeting it was. I can't believe it's been 15 years already. I've been a charter holder for 20 years. I think you just missed me by a year or two. He's been, back then he was the CIO of Reliance Mutual Fund. I think before that your background is chartered accounting. I've seen you at the AI conferences as well. And now he runs his own PMS, Abakkus. So welcome Sunil. Thank you.
Thank you, Hansi. So I'll just take you through 4 or 5 slides in 5-10 minutes before we have this discussion. Thanks a lot. Good morning. I know it's very early for you to be very attentive, but I'll try to make it a little interesting so that you all wake up. So I think what I've tried to cover in this is, use my experience on the sell side when being a CIO in a large firm called Reliance, and in the last 1.5 years of managing small sums of money, $300 million in my own venture Abakkus, and how construction of portfolio management can differ, what are the things which we need to keep an eye on very quickly, and I am very sure that Hansi will try and extract more out of me when we have an informal discussion. So I think the first thing is that whenever we manage portfolios, we have to have a framework. So everyone will have a different framework. I think what we have developed at Abakkus using 20 years of making mistakes. Making mistakes is the best way of learning, because unless you pay fees, the learning doesn't get ingrained in your mind. So when you make mistakes in the equity markets, it's a very expensive mistake, and that's how we learn. So I think 20-25 years of learning as we have created our own framework, but for anyone who is wanting to manage money, whether it's individual money, group money, outsider money, you have to have a framework. And the second thing is you have to have a process. Again, these are not laid down rules, regulations. Everyone will have their own frameworks and their own processes. But if you lay down your own philosophy, your own rules and your own processes, I think more often than not, you will end up preventing mistakes. So making returns is not only about picking the right stocks, it is also about not picking the wrong stocks. Because it's possible that you end up picking quite a few good stocks and you have one bad stock which goes down 90-95% and all your gains get wiped out. So I think if you have a process, it definitely helps. Then there are a lot of ifs and buts. I think this is all self-explanatory, and Hansi will cover it. But there's a difference between managing retail money, institutional money. The objectives are very different. So again, when you manage money, one thing we have to be very clear is who is the beneficiary of, or who is the client, and what is the client object. Different clients will have different objectives. An institutional investor from overseas, the objective would be to just make beta from the Indian market. So if the Indian market goes up 5%, the investor will be happy making 5%. At the same time, there would be some retail investors who, even if the market goes down 10%, would expect it to make 20%. So you have to know the final objective of the client also. And then, flows and this and that, I think we'll cover that once we do that. The one thing is, there's always a bias. So typically what happens is, analysts graduate to becoming portfolio manager. So an analyst who's looking at financials will have an automatic bias towards the financial services. And I have noticed in my career that analysts who graduate into becoming portfolio managers invariably end up being overweight on the sector they used to cover when they were analysts. So I think these biases also come into play, and which we have to remove from our mind. The other is street. So we have been in the news recently for buying one stock, and I don't know what has happened, but some other investors bought that stock, and the stock has been hitting circuit. I don't know whether the investors are looking at the fundamentals or looking at who's bought it. So I think this biases creep in when you start to follow, people who have been in the market for a long period of time. And I think this is happening even in the global scenario. A good analyst comes out with a report, and invariably the stock will move up. Some marquee investor buys something, the stock will move up, and so on and so forth. There's always a difference between your in-house view and a street view that one has to take into account. And one thing, at least, which I tell my team is that equity investing is all about being optimistic. If you become too pessimistic that Iran is going to happen and Korea is going to happen and Indian economy is going to go down and this and that, then you should stop investing in equity, because equity investing is all about believing that the tomorrow is going to be much better than today and yesterday. If you don't believe that, please sell all your equity, go into gold or go into fixed income or whatever, but equity is only for optimists. And then, there are regrets. You end up not buying something, you end up selling something too soon. Sometimes you are lucky. So, when you are lucky, you don't tell the world you are lucky. You tell them that you are smart, but you have to believe in yourself that you are lucky. Then, you have to be satisfied or not. That also is a thing. And sometimes you get stuck. Obviously, we all make mistakes. So, there has to be a realization when you get stuck. So, at the first opportunity, you can undo the position. And I think there's a herd mentality bias. There is a, leading bias. I mentioned to you, someone else buying will make you buy it. So I think even when I was working with Reliance, we used to always see what the other fund houses are doing in terms of buying and selling. And whether you accept or not, it does lead to some biases. And then, once you have the stock, invariably, even if the stock does not perform, you believe that it's a great stock. So there's a saying, when I was in Reliance, I had a colleague who had a saying in his cabin: the stock does not know that you own it. So just because you own it, the stock will go up. The stock ko pata nahi hai that you own it. And I think those, things are also important. The last piece which I have written about, it's great to be in quality, and right now quality is in favor. Quality at what price is something which one has to remember. So I think this is all a very, very short sort of introductory session. I hand over to now Hansi to carry this forward.
Is it on now? Okay, cool. Okay, so while they're fixing that, let me tell you my story. I started as a mutual fund analyst in 1995, and one of the meetings I went to with my boss at the time, he was a mutual fund research house CEO, and he took me to this portfolio manager, fund manager, who had just quit a very large fund house called Bankers Trust. This is in Australia. So I thought, and my boss was very sweet, and he said, you ask the questions. You're the first interview, you ask the question. So I started asking him, how did you pick this stock and how did you do this? And this guy would just answer. He just said, what do you know about the 87 crash? This is in 1995. Okay, I was already an analyst. What do you know about the 87 crash? I said, well, I have read about it. obviously I wasn't there, I was at school. And he just folded his arms and said, young lady, there's a difference between reading about it and living through it. So when you live through a few crashes, then you have the right to interview. So that was kind of a good start. And when I finally graduated to actually interview managers, I came to see Sunil. And I had spent my career in Australia, so then I came to India and I started asking Indian fund managers questions. Nobody said it, but I had that look again from Indian fund managers saying, you know there's nothing about Australia, but what do you know about India? So now I've spent the last 8 years living in India, so hopefully I get to ask you some halfway intelligent questions. Thank you for the presentation. I want to focus on one question that I get on Quora all the time, which is the difference between being an analyst, which is what the CFA sort of teaches you, and being a fund manager. You mentioned all the mistakes that you've made in the last 25 years. In CFA, you kind of tend to learn how to build a stock model, but how do you build your investment philosophy? How would you say you graduate from an analyst to being a portfolio manager as somebody else's CIO, and then you become a CIO? How has your investment philosophy changed over the years, over the decades?
So, I've been in this market for a long period of time, and I have had people working for me. And because of my CFA Connect, I also have had multiple young professionals come and seek guidance from me. One thing I have noticed is that every analyst, whether the analyst is a 6-month experienced analyst or a 20-year experienced analyst, wants to graduate into being a fund manager. And the other thing which I find is analysts always believe that the fund manager they report to is less competent than the analyst. The third thing is fund management, I would say, is more than just being a good analyst. And I would give some examples to it. So I go to Frame every year to teach, and 2-3 years back I did a session where I presented the qualification of fund managers in India and the qualification of fund managers in the US. So Indian fund managers by and large were CA, MBA, IIT, IIM graduates, and with some financial background and so on and so forth. In US, there were historians, military people, doctors, psychology professionals, and so on and so forth. And this was very startling. I think it clearly showed that a fund manager is much more than only number crunching. So I think from an analyst perspective, one thing is very sure that you do definitely need the basics in terms of knowing the numbers, knowing projections, and so on and so forth. But how those projections can lead to stock price performance, that is something which we need to understand. So price is a function of two things, earnings and P. Earnings you can crack by being the best analyst and best spreadsheet. But P or perception is in no one's hand. Whether the P is 5 or 50 will depend on a lot of things other than those. And the returns are made not by getting your last earning right, but actually figuring out the P. So I think to the budding analysts who want to graduate to the portfolio management, one is, it's not bad to be an analyst all your life. There are such phenomenal analysts, well-known analysts in the world who have stuck to their core competence, which is analysis. But if you want to graduate to becoming a fund manager, you have to start thinking beyond numbers. And I think that is what one has to look at it.
So I was going to say, investment philosophy over the decades. How has it changed? Like what, in every learning, what mistakes have you made and what have you learned each time?
So one thing is, obviously investment philosophies of different kinds work in different periods. So in the late 90s, it was all about blind growth. People who did numbers were out of jobs, and people who just believed in the big theme of eyeballs and all were in. Those philosophies changed, you had value coming in. The last 3-4 years, India, it's all about buying quality at any price. So philosophies will keep on changing. if we start to mold ourselves and try to adapt different philosophies, we will be nowhere. I think we have to understand one thing, that every individual has a nature. And you can tweak the nature a little bit. But if you try to tweak yourself completely, you will be nowhere. So I think at least from my side, I am very clear that I don't like to buy very expensive stocks unless I find growth compensating the expensiveness or the higher valuation. And I think for each one, each portfolio manager, he or she has to recognize their core sort of ingrained perspective. You don't try to change yourself. Stick to what you believe you are good at, and I think you will do a better job rather than trying to change philosophy.
So a few sort of questions come out of that. I mean, you said you don't change your nature, right? And you go and work at AMC one, and then you go and work for a different AMC, and now you work for your own. To what extent is your fund being managed in line with your own philosophy versus the organizational philosophy? And to what extent, I know you are an exception because you are the CIO, but a lot of young portfolio managers, before they become CIO, do they have any say in crafting the investment philosophy of that mutual fund house or PMS?
Well, I think surely. So even when I was a CIO at Reliance, I had some 6-7 portfolio managers, each with a different style and a different, I would say, trait or expertise. And you have to realize, if you are a CIO, you have to realize that you have to find people who are smarter than you, rather than trying to believe that you are the smartest. I think the company, the enterprise will grow if you find more and more smarter people and people with different perspectives. So I think what we do even now at Abakkus, we have 3-4 really, young, smart professionals, because the new age businesses of technology and retail and spending, I think to some extent we will be beyond that. And you need the guys who are experiencing that on a day-to-day basis to tell us of the importance. I'll tell you a very small thing. My son studies, he was in New York, now he's studying in Berkeley. And 2 years back, I was speaking to him. I speak to him at least once every day. He told me that by Nintendo, and I had no idea what Nintendo except the play was which used to play when he was small. He told me that Pokemon Go is becoming a craze and the stock is going to fly. I'm just giving you a perspective. He is an engineering student. He doesn't know anything about finance or anything, but he experienced it. So I think sometimes you also have to create a team which has youth, a little bit of different kind of flavor, and experienced people. And when you marry that, I think that is how a good team is made. In terms of an analyst say, I think the analyst say is very important. If the analyst proves the depth in the analysis.
So two things. The analyst is doing the stock research. So I was going to ask you, what proportion of the fund manager returns or fund returns do you attribute to good research, and how much do you attribute to portfolio management? And the reason I'm asking is, at Mercer we had a 4-point framework. Idea generation, which is basically where all the value is added. Second is portfolio management, where you do sort of the weighting of the stocks. Third is operational sort of execution, where you don't give it away by executing badly, either having too much AUM, having too little. And the fourth one is business management. But we are very clear that the value add mostly comes from idea generation. So I was kind of curious as to, in your experience, when you do the attribution, how much of your attribution comes from the stock research, which you may have a hand in, and how much from portfolio management?
So see, from an analyst perspective, it is very difficult to work with headstrong and experienced people like me. And there are too many of them in India because there's been very big stability. But we have to understand how will idea generation come across. Idea generation comes across meeting companies, analyzing sectors, analyzing companies. And it is impossible for one portfolio manager to analyze 2,000 actively traded companies in India and where the analyst role comes in. We have seen instances where obviously analysts keep on pushing stocks. The portfolio manager also will use his or her insights and try and reason with it. But I think one thing which we try to do is at least sit with the analyst and reason out why we are going ahead or not going ahead with the stock idea. Because that also helps the analyst start to learn about portfolio management and also get in sync with the thought process of the fund manager. See, ultimately the fund manager's thought process has to gel because finally the portfolio manager is answerable and responsible for the fund returns. But idea generation will obviously depend a lot on how forthcoming the analysts are. So if each analyst is doing 30, 40 stocks, and if you have 10 analysts, then you have 300, 400 stocks doing lower, which is impossible for one person. I think that is where the analysts become very important. The only one advice I will give to the analyst is the analyst should not get too much, hassled if the portfolio manager decides not to buy the stock. Because the analyst's job is to keep on bringing the ideas. There might be other reasons, as you said, portfolio construct, view on the sector, weighting on the sector, which might lead to the portfolio manager taking the call, which is not in line with what the analyst is pushing. But definitely the analyst role is very, very important. Otherwise, we will not have so many analysts working in the buy side also.
Yeah, but you tend to know the fund managers' names, you tend not to know the analyst names. When I was
I don't think it is true. I don't think it is true.
Abby Joseph Cohen was the rockstar analyst that we used to look to. But there were so many more fund managers.
I don't know. I think if you count in India, the fund managers' names also will be very painful. Because there are very few of us who have survived 15, 20 years of bad markets, like you said. But again, one thing is that are you working to be famous? Are you working to be doing your job properly and for your self-satisfaction? Because ultimately, if you do your job well, even a character actor in a movie finally gets rewarded. I was reading an interview of an actor called Pankaj Tripathi. I know him, I like him a lot. He started working in the movies in 2004 as a very small side artist. And this year, his first film with the lead will be released. There are others also. I think Irfan Khan and Nawazuddin Siddiqui and so many of them. I'm just giving an example. I'm aware of Bollywood movies. But if you do your work well, recognition will definitely follow.
Okay, so just you mentioned in your slides as well, you obviously manage Reliance, which is a large mutual fund, managing Abakkus, and you also are on the investment committee for the CFA endowment. What is the difference in those three portfolios, and especially global sort of portfolios versus Indian portfolios? Like, to what extent can you apply what you've learned in the CFA in India? And
so I was in the investment committee for 2 years. I was the chair of the investment committee for 1 year. I finished my term on 31st of August 2019. So that was a $500 million fund, largely surplus of Safety Institute kept for future years. I think it was a well sort of process-driven fund management, and it was more allocation and risk measurement because this money belongs to the members and candidates and for future use of the institute. And I think what we learned there obviously is the global markets, different asset classes, because that fund used to invest in equity, fixed income, commodities, even alternatives like timber and REITs and so on and so forth. And as I said, it was very process driven where you could only move within a range. So you were given say US equity, you had a range of 30 to 40%. So as a investment committee, you could only move within that range. So it was very well process driven, but you had a little bit of flexibility. In Reliance, obviously it was a large fund house. We had different funds with different investment strategies. I think there it was a treadmill. Unfortunately, we have a daily and daily. I say it unfortunately. It is a good thing for the investor, but for the portfolio manager, you are on a treadmill on a day-to-day basis. 5-year, 3-year, 1 year, 1 week, 1 day basis. And you get measured even on 1 day basis. Markets are up 2%, you are up 1.8%, you are doing the bad. So I think to some extent you tend to become asset allocators and relative performance. You know, your performance, even Mercer or some other thing would rate you based on your relative ranking rather than what you have done. Also, risk is measured in a very different manner. So I'll give you a perspective. You know, one of the largest, CRISIL does fund rating, and I used to always have an argument with them. Our funds used to be 10,000 crores, 8,000 crores. The size of the fund used to be large. There were other mutual funds in the country which had fund sizes of 400 crores, 500 crores. So obviously, if you have a 10,000 crore fund, the exposure to say something like Reliance for us would be 500 crores, 800 crores. For a 500 crore fund, it would be 30 crores, 40 crores. So liquidity was dependent on the size of the fund rather than on the stock. So we used to always get negative marks because we were a large fund. So I think sometimes, you know, there is illogic also which comes into play, but being a part of the industry, you have to follow that. In Abakkus, we are predominantly alpha. So, you know, our message to our investors is very clear. If you are looking at day-to-day basis, please don't look at us. We are going to invest as if we are investing in business, and that is what we are doing. And the structure of the fund is also such that once the investor comes in, the investor has no option but to stick with us for 5 years, even though they might not like our face next year. So I think it's a very different kind of a thing, but I think the underlying is the same. Ultimately, you are investing in equity to make returns with a proper philosophy objective, which might be different for different. So CFA should have a different objective. Reliance Mutual Fund had a different objective. Abakkus has a different objective. But the basics are the same. And you have to marry your investments based on that philosophy and objective.
Okay. I'm starting to get a few questions, but I have a few more. I'm going to skip most of the nuts and bolts questions. Srinivas, how much time do we have?
14 minutes.
14 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to skip most of the questions. Just FYI, I'm going to be doing more of these interviews and putting them up on my site, so hopefully I get to review later. Selling strategy. People sort of, the whole course and most of what people talk about is buying. And if mutual funds keep growing, you can keep getting inflows and stuff. But have you faced an outflow, or even when you haven't, have you made a very big sale call? And what sort of discipline is required to develop a selling strategy?
So on the first point, I think luckily I have never faced significant outflows. So at CFA Institute, we used to always have inflows, thanks to the number of candidates growing. At Reliance Mutual Fund, even the worst time, which was linked to the crisis, or in 2011-13, we had a very difficult economy in India. The maximum outflow which we have faced is like 0.5%. So outflows has never been a cause of concern. Though in individual funds, you keep on having inflows and outflows. On selling strategies, it's a tough call, frankly, and you always realize whether you were smart or foolish in hindsight. So I would say the biggest 2 regrets in my life have been selling stocks early. At Reliance Mutual Fund, I ended up buying Bajaj Finance 9% of the equity at a market cap between 500 crores to 1,000 crores. 500 to 1,000 crores. That was in 2008-9. And because at that point of time returns were so scarce, the stock went up 2-3 times. We thought we had hit a jackpot and we got out. Market cap of 2,000 to 2,500 crores. The market cap now is 100x. It's 250,000 crores. And you know, by nature, human beings have biases. So if you have sold something at a market cap of 2,500 crores, it's very difficult to get in again at 5,000, 10,000 crores market cap. You feel you're a fool. Same thing happened with Eicher Motors. We were able to buy 10% of the company at a market cap of something 400 crores in one single block post 2000. Foreign investor wanted to get out. And within 1 year, we had like tripled our money. And it was a jackpot. In Lehman Brothers time, if you triple your money in 1 year, like, you are the king. But from there, the stock went up 50 times. So in hindsight, it always is a tough call. It is possible that, after selling, you might have been better off by buying some other stocks. And there have been other stocks where we have sold off, like Industrial Power, we sold off, and the stock has not even come back to that level for 8-9 years. But you want to learn, and the learning can happen only if you see where you could have done better. So I think one thing which we have at least learned is that you sell the stock for 3 reasons. One is when you are wrong. Very clearly. I think more often than not we get stuck with stocks where we are wrong, but we keep on justifying to ourselves, pride will come. We'll get on I've done research, we go to our thing, EPS itna hi hai, ye hai, but EPS and price don't go in sync. So that is one thing. Second is, if you believe that the stock has gone far beyond its fair value, don't bother about who's buying, who's selling. Don't fear that it might go further, because no investor is about that you'll be able to buy at the most lowest price and sell at the highest. But trade in a stock exchange happens when there is a buyer and a seller. So the buyer of the stock also has some perspective. The buyer who's buying from you also has a perspective. So it is possible that even after you sell the stock might move up a little bit, but it is fine. You're creating a portfolio, you will get into something else, you could have done better. And I think third is capital is scarce. You don't have unlimited capital. So if you get a better opportunity, even though you might like a stock, if you feel that this stock I have might give me 15% return, some other stock might give me 15% return, it always makes sense to switch, because it's all about marginal additional return from what you have. So I think these are the three things that we try to follow. But theory is theory, practical is practical. God has given us everything, but kept sentiments and ego and everything with human beings, we get carried away. But if you try to practice it, maybe in 8 out of 10 times, you'll exercise this.
One of the things that in my whole career I would have arguments with fund managers would be cash position. Because most of them would manage mutual funds and investors are obviously retail investors look at people like you and say, why didn't you see the crash coming? I mean, we didn't see it coming, understandable, but you are a fund manager, professional. So if you saw it coming, why didn't you go to cash? And I know the mandate is to be in equities, but have you sort of struggled with that?
So it's a double-edged sword. One is, if anyone could, forecast the market movement even for 1 day, accurate, that person would be more wealthier than Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, everyone put together. So it is impossible to forecast what is going to happen to the markets. The day Iran issue happened, everyone was very sure that now the Nifty is going to go down to 10,511. Within 2 days, the sentiment is completely changed. So it is impossible. Second is, as I said, it's a double-edged sword. So I'll give you a practical example. 2003, I joined Reliance. Luckily, our philosophy was very different from the market. We were bold, we were different. No one in our team had any experience of managing funds. We were all equity guys, but the entire team had no experience of managing funds. So we had no biases. We did phenomenally well. There was a tailwind of world doing well, media doing well. Within 5 years, from being the smallest TMC, we became the largest TMC. Our even did case studies on us. And we got record flows in 2007 over the power sector fund which I used to manage grew from 700 crores to 7,000 crores thanks in 1 year. And we could see the fraud. But there is a business angle to it and there is a fund management angle to it. We had 25-30% cash with the maximum allowed. And we were heroes for 1 year. But markets are markets. 2009, when everyone thought it is going to be the end of the world, the market made a U-turn. And within 1 year, the markets had almost doubled. And the 25% cash definitely hurt us. And we are in a period by period kind of assessment. So in 3 years, we were still the best performing fund. But if Mercer did a study on us, 1 year, no, this magic is waning. Get out, move to something else. So it's a double-edged sword. I think one thing at least which we have learned is that it is always better to buy the right stocks rather than just help. So even in Abakkus, the first fund which we have raised, we are 88% invested, we still have 12%. It's not that we are not positive on the market, I'm extremely positive on the middle and small. But I don't want to help. We want to buy stocks. In the second fund, we are 60% invested. It's a small cap below 6,000 crore market cap fund. But again, you just don't want to allocate. You want to buy from a 3-4 years perspective. So I think as investor, I don't think you should get bothered about whether the fund you have invested in is 10% cash, 20% cash. It does not make much of a difference. Before giving the money to the fund manager, do the whole research and then leave it to the fund manager. Don't try to micromanage.
Okay. Something that you raised in your slides as well, and I guess the main reason for being here, you're an aspiring fund manager. What temperament do you look for when you promote an analyst to being a fund manager, and what should they be reading, or what do you read to become a fund manager?
So attributes, first is passion. I see a lot of analysts. Everyone wants to be a stock. Even in my office, I have some 8-9 analysts, and every 2-3 months, someone comes in. Sir, I'm doing this sector. I want to do stock. I said, even in a sector, you can do stock. One is what you want to do. The other is how you want to do it. I think equity investing is about passion. I don't think there is a time. We all would say that there has to be a work-life balance, this, that, everything is fine. But your brains have to be active for all the seconds you are awake. There's no technology to keep your brains active when you're sleeping. But as long as you're awake, every second your brain has to be active. Because everything you see, do, feel is a stock idea. And the biggest stock ideas come not from reading, balance sheet, this, that, obviously that helps, but by observing. So again, if you would have observed 5-10 years back, you would have started to see that every week the domino guys used to ring the bell. When you used to move out, everywhere instead of public sector banks, you could see private sector. You could see SIPs happening for so long, and yet no one was investing in asset management. Amazon rings the bell every 2-3 days. That was the advent of technology. So I think every second, every minute, even when you're on a holiday, you see things. So first time when I went abroad, 5 days you were abroad and 4 days was spent in malls. Because it was a big thing. We had never seen malls. And whatever happens in one part of the world is ultimately going to happen everywhere, because human beings, black, white, small, large, tall, short, are same. And I think we have seen how the retail sector, how the branded sector in India is going. So I think these are attributes which we have to look at it. As far as reading is concerned, I would say that apart from everything what you like, the one thing which I would suggest is that read autobiographies. Because, call it diversity. Once you have reached 55, 60, I won't say my age, but once you reach that, what you do? You write a book. You have nothing else to do, so you write a book. And you imagine something that, someone's 25, 30 years of experience is put in a book. Whoever writes a book wants a book to be the best. No one is going to write a shit book, right? They want to be the bestseller. So the book is well written. And for 500 rupees, you get the experience of a 25, 30-year-old work experience, So please buy the official copy of the book, don't borrow. Answer to those who. But autobiographies are a great way of learning, of knowing challenges, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, there are so many books. Nowadays, I think every day there must be 20, 30 books that must be getting released. But I would say autobiography is something which no one should ignore.
There's also movies, right? I don't know whether people are watching Billions, but I finished last night. I saw 3 episodes. It's a life of funds management, usually hedge fund management. To what extent are stories that come there? I mean, I'm sure they do their research, right?
No, I am also a movie fan, but I would warn you, I saw Bazaar with my wife. She didn't talk to me for 15 days. Because she started to feel that all the fund managers were like Saif Ali Khan. Affairs and sex and swindling of money and so on and so forth. So see movies at your own risk. But yes, it's a good dramatization of what goes on. I would still suggest that read biographies. Watch movie for entertainment.
What about Michael Lewis's book? I mean, they are biographies, they're not autobiography, but they're biographies. He does investigative thing. And even that, all the Michael Lewis books that I've read, and they are real stories, there is a lot of stuff that is not taught in the CFA curriculum in terms of what doesn't get done by the book. I don't want to put you on the spot, but to what extent does the temperament of the person have to be such that they can take all that in their stride?
So see, one thing is in life, one needs to be heard and seen. How can you be heard and seen? One is if you excel, but that percentage is very small. Everyone will try to excel, but the person who ultimately ends up excelling, that percentage is very small. It's a combination of talent, lot of luck, and so on and so forth. Then the other best way of becoming famous is by becoming controversial and by writing a little bit of negative things. See, as human beings, we like to pull down people more than we want to push them up. That is human nature. So yes, we have to learn from all these, and we have to also learn from mistakes. But I am a positive and optimistic guy. Believe in good things. If your conscience is clear, why even get into, knowing what wrong things have happened. If you're clear you don't want to do wrong things, you don't need to know or learn. But as I said, it's good entertainment. It's good learning, you might not get carried away. So you read if you have time. I think reading is unlimited. Unfortunately, time is limited. Even I would wish that I read a book every week, but nahi hota hai. You get into so many other things, conferences, work. Then I have a little bit of Hindi mein bolte na keeda. So I'm involved in a Goregaon Sports Club. I'm involved in a society. I'm in some committee. So ultimately, you'll have to balance your life, but read whatever you can. Reading is never going to go waste.
Speaking of time, we are out of time. Sorry I couldn't get to all the questions, but thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks a lot.
And I'll say that I will hassle you and do a longer interview on video and put that up. So hopefully this won't stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.